Hello and welcome to another episode of the 1965 Ranch Talk. And today I've got another very interesting guest. He likes to crunch the numbers, he loves being on a saddle, and most importantly, he's doing it all for education. So I'm going to bring him onto the stream without actually using up time and allow you to get to know this really great person. He does his updates almost every morning as he goes out for a ride. So most importantly, it's going to be easy to even follow him. Most importantly, more important than that, as you can hear that I'm being redundant a bit. So to avoid the redundancy, let's bring on Zack onto the screen.
Hello, Komani.
Amora, how are you?
How are you? Well, thanks to you, Komani.
I'm good. I'm in good spirits, and the reason I'm in good spirits is because I'm speaking to you. I'm speaking to a person who loves numbers, who loves cycling, who loves children, who loves education. And there's quite a number of other things that you love. But most importantly, the one thing that brings us today in terms of us having conversation is cycling.
Yeah. Oh, yes, no, absolutely. I mean, absolute passion of mine.
Yes, and that is going to start with the first question with regards to that. Okay, firstly, we'd love for you to introduce yourself, and secondly, also just allow us to get to know what ignited that passion when it comes to cycling.
Yes, so Komani, well, a little bit about me, I guess. I'm an accountant. I run the finance department for the South African arm of a large multinational. That's what I do during the day. I have a passion for numbers. I'm a data guy. I'm a numbers guy. And that has also come through a little bit in some stuff that I do on the ride. My passion for cycling, well, my passion for cycling actually started with the ride. I've been good friends with Mr. Tony Frost, the founder of the ride, for many years, and didn't take long after meeting Tony for me to find out about the ride and the good that the ride does, and for Tony to start on at me about actually taking up cycling and joining the ride. For many, many years, Tony was always on my back about getting onto a saddle. And the funny thing is that I was an avid cyclist in my youth. I mean, I was one of those kids that had a bicycle and went absolutely everywhere on this bicycle, right up into my late teens. I think when I was 19, I didn't have a car yet, and I cycled everywhere. That's what I did. And then one day, my dad gave me a car, and the bicycle got put in the garage, never to be seen again. In fact, I still don't know whatever happened to that bicycle. And and then it was in 2023 when Tony basically gave me a call and said to me, "Listen, Morris, I've the last time we had seen each other was about a month or two prior to that, and we had met for some breakfast or what have you. And Tony had called me up and he said, "Listen, I've seen you looking in better health than you're looking at the moment, and I think I had probably put on a few pounds, and it was middle of winter when one normally does let oneself go because it's much easier to hibernate than to get out there and do stuff to keep you fit." And as Tony does, he called me up and he said, "Listen, you're actually looking terrible, and I think you need to join me at gym." And he said to me, "And you've been promising me, been promising to do the ride for so many years that don't you think it's about time you got yourself into shape and joined me next year, being the 2024 ride?" And Tony can be very persistent.
True.
Very persistent indeed. So I couldn't get him off my back until I'd actually committed to joining him at his gym. And so when I finally said to him, "Listen, okay, let's do it," it was 2 weeks' time and all of this. And I thought this is the only way I'm going to get rid of Tony. And I put the phone down and I put it in my diary. And I thought, you know what? I mean, it's been quite some time since my fat self had actually seen a gym. So I thought, well, you know what? It'll be great to see Tony. It'll be even funnier to see Tony in gym pants. So let me meet him there. And 2 weeks later, I arrived at the gym, so did Tony. And he was very surprised to see me that I'd actually pitched up. And he called this rather burly gentleman over to me, and he said, "By the way, I want you to meet somebody." And he introduced me to this gentleman. His name's Francois, and he said, "Francois, this is Morris. Morris, this is Francois." And he said to me, "Morris, Francois is your new personal trainer, and today is your first session." And yeah. Tony caught me completely by surprise, and I was like, "What?" And then Tony said, "Bye, I'll be on the treadmill. I'll see you later." And I looked at Francois and I said, "Well, nice to meet you." I said, "How much is this going to cost me?" And he said, "Today, nothing." He says, "Today's on me." I don't know if it was on him or if it was on Tony, but anyway. And so I spent an hour working out with good old Francois. And I absolutely loved it. I was actually quite a fit guy in my youth, but then, life gets in the way, and that sort of falls by the wayside. I went home and my wife said, "How was that?" And I said, "You know what? I think Tony has made a point, and let me continue on this path." And I said to Tony, we spoke to each other a bit later, and I said, "I'll tell you what, I'm going to do the ride next year." And so that's how I got back into cycling, was actually Tony pushing me to go to gym, get in shape, and join him on the ride. And it took about another 3 weeks, and Tony helped me source a bicycle, and that's where it started.
All right. So tell me, in your youth, there was something that I actually came across on Facebook, and it asked me, what was the brand that made you fall in love with cycling?
Well, I mean, I'm getting on in the years these days, and back in my day, there was only one real brand of bicycle, and that was Rally. And so I had a 12-speed Rally. Yeah.
All right.
A good
I
old
think that is
12-speed Rally.
I think, okay, in the time that I started doing it, it was Giant and Rally. Those were the more or less the competing brands.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, interesting. And if you rode a Rally, you were actually quite cool, So that was the other thing. So you move from your youth, Tony gets involved and says, "Hey, Morris, here we go." And you did the ride the first time around in 2024. How was that feeling for you to actually be part of something like that?
Well, Tony says this will change your life, and you don't actually understand how much it will do that until you partake in the ride, and you are part of something that is so much bigger than yourself or any other, anybody else on the ride, and any other individual involved in this. Tony has created something over the last 16 years that is much bigger than any of us, and you don't really understand it until you commit and start doing and training and start getting involved and start understanding, what the ride is all about, what the intention of the ride is, and the good that it is doing in the community of Queenstown and surrounds, and the difference that it's actually making to people's lives. And I'm not going to say just students' lives or scholars' lives, because it's changing the lives of families.
You speak about family, and I like that very much. And there's something that I actually once mentioned, which was quite a number of people, it's not just the leave that you apply for at work, but for a good number of days, you're away from your family. How does that sort of detachment feel like when you move from your family and you are for the next 8 days in this bubble with a different family, which is the cyclists?
Yeah, I like the way that you put it, because we do become a family, and every year you've got the good old stalwarts, the guys you've done it with before, but there's always new people, and you form lifelong friendships, and you make connections with people being away. And you're right, it is a big commitment. You end up taking time off from work. I'm using my own leave for this, and I'm away from my wife and my child, and I miss them very much on the ride. I really do. And I think we're all in that predicament as all of the riders, and we support each other. And it's lots of phone calls as well to the family, especially my daughter, who also misses me very much, and I miss her. It is quite tough, but once again, as I say, this thing is bigger than all of us. So it's part of what I'm doing is also giving of my time, and that time is unfortunately away from my family.
Yeah, you talk about that, and as I said, you've done the ride before, and as much as you've done it, you decided, okay, I'm going to do 2024, I'm going to do 2025, I'm going to do 2026. And what would you say has been the one thing that has made you feel that I can continue doing this?
Komani, I think it just really comes back to the cause that we do this for. I'm a firm believer that education is one way that we will change the trajectory of this country, and how we will lift communities out of impoverishment by giving them opportunities, by letting them study and giving them opportunities to actually go out there and become, active economic, citizens that are contributing to the economy. And that's really why I'm doing it.
Lovely. I normally say to people, we can speak about this for hours and hours because of just the immense contribution that this has to our communities. So the one thing in terms of the two things rather before you part that I'd actually like you to do, one of them is the fact that I know that you are the stats guy, that you bring up all the stats and say, okay, this is what we have done today. So is it possible for us to just get a sense of what of the bubble and part of the whole family camaraderie spirit?
Komani, I did lose you there for a second, so if you wouldn't mind just repeating your question.
Right. The question there was, you are normally the stats guy and you bring up the stats most often than not at the end of each day. So would you mind for just today to just give a rundown of some of the stats?
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, just as a little bit of background, 3 years ago, I think I stood up after our first dinner with my trusty Garmin app open, and it had a whole bunch of numbers, and I thought, let me share some of the numbers with the guys. And so it has now become a tradition that this is what I do after dinner every night. I share the stats, and we've created a little bit of a thing. It's called What's the Stats with Tamora. So yeah, and I love it. I mean, it's so interesting knowing exactly what we've done and the effort that we've put in to get where we're going. So, as an example, and I have my laptop open here next to me just to share some interesting stats. I mean, we're on day 5. We have travelled from Heidelberg. We are now in Wepener. In fact, I'm coming to you from the good old Lord Fraser Hotel in Wepener. And so far, we have travelled 507 kilometers. So we've sat on a bicycle for 507 kilometers. We have spent 22 hours and 46 minutes in that saddle, and that's moving time. So if we take our, from when we start, all the stopping for tea breaks, which we do, you need to stop, you need to take a break, you need to eat and drink. We have spent 31 hours and 34 minutes from Heidelberg now to over 5 days to Wepener. Some interesting stuff is that we've climbed 4.7 kilometers. So we've gone up 4.7 kilometers, and we have gone down almost 4.9 kilometers. So we actually are going downhill to Queenstown, I'm very happy to say. And let me think if there's anything else. So I also have a sensor on my bike, cadence sensor on the bike that measures my pedal strokes. And up to today, my legs have turned around that pedal crank 70,477 times. Yeah, these legs have spent a little bit of time going around and around. And yeah, so these are just some interesting things too that the guys I think really enjoy, even though pedal strokes are my own, but it gives guys a sense of exactly what their own achievements are as well. But yeah, and it's fun to know what you're doing. It's fun to know exactly how many kilometers you've gone and how much you've spent, sort of, the time you've spent getting there. So
yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for the stats. And then also in closing, I would just like to just hear a short message from you to all the people that are investing in education, investing in the 1965 ride, and most importantly, the community that always buys into the 1965 ride and what everyone does on the tour.
It's such an important initiative, Komani. As I've said it before, I think education and educating our youth is how we change this country and how we get ourselves on a better trajectory. I've seen the good, firsthand that this fund and this cause has achieved. We've seen our first medical doctor, we've seen our first chartered accountant coming out of this program, and these are people who whose parents did not have the resources or the means, to get these kids to where they have gone. And also these kids themselves have gone back into the community and are giving back. And isn't this what we want? This is the Ubuntu that we have in this country, and this is the South Africa that I want to live in. And I think if we look at it, is this not where the South Africa that everybody wants to live in? And that's why this is such a good initiative and such a good cause. And I'm urging everybody watching this, please click that link and donate. And no amount is too small. Every single rand makes a difference.
All right. Thank you very much, Tamora, for your time. As we said, we can actually speak about this for yonks years, but at the moment we are going to leave it at that. And I'll allow you to take your leave and just rest for this evening, as you still have a couple of more days to go. And I look forward to seeing you on day 8, which is this coming Thursday. And for the people that are watching at home, please do invest in education, and also understand the cause is bigger than the people that are even part of it. And you can take your part and be part of education for the future that we have and the South Africa that we want to envision for ourselves. All right. Thank you very much, Tamora, and have a very good evening. And yeah.
Komani, I'll see you on Thursday. Look forward to it.
All right. Looking forward to it as well.